go. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you this morning, afternoon, night, wherever you happen to be. Always happy to see all of you and to take you through something that takes up a lot of my time during the day. I think in many ways, without intending to, I have become a professional fundraiser. That is true for my venture capital fund and for all of our portfolio companies. It is true for Resolution as chair of the board and a co-founder. It's true for my college and for other types of fundraising. And so indeed, this is an area that I've developed a lot of expertise in, and I'm happy to share some of that with you. There are lots of different fundraising styles out there, so whatever works for you, obviously, is the thing that you should go with. But I hope that I'm able to share with you fairly compactly some best practices that I have found to be useful. What I tend to do for those of you who don't know is move pretty quickly through a little bit of prepared material that I have for you, and then mainly just throw it open for questions because the real lived experience that you're having, particularly in a global economy that is very stressful right now and very uncertain, which makes fundraising even more difficult. So the degree of difficulty is certainly higher now than it's often is. That we should save some time to just talk through the very real nature of that. So I'm going to move pretty quickly through this. I will say also, as you hear things you want to learn more about, either drop something in the chat or raise your hand or just interrupt me. I don't mind. If I want to wait to answer the question until afterwards, because I'm going to talk about it later, I'll just let you know. But please feel free to make this interactive. It's a small group, and I want to make sure this is relevant to all of you. So without further ado, let's jump in. There are four main categories of points I want to talk about. And the first of those points is knowing what you need to raise money for and the structure of that. This is a thing that a lot of people spend way too little time on, especially in certain kinds of places, like if you have a startup and you're trying to raise venture capital, or if you have a nonprofit and you're just trying to raise money for a nonprofit because you've heard of other nonprofits raising money. A lot of what happens is people are like, well, maybe I should, raise $1 million or $100,000 or $50,000 because maybe that's what I think I can get. And I'm not really sure how that's going to happen or who it's going to come from or what I'm really going to use it for. Now, obviously, that's, I'm being a little bit reductive here, but actually, it's a big problem. A lot of people are raising not the right amount of money in not the right amount of structure. And structure is really important. So, again, I know Resolution Fellows have everything from for profit, incorporated startup type ventures or nonprofits or even unincorporated ventures. There is always an appropriate structure in which to raise money, and there are varying levels of the difficulty in how you do that. So the first question is always, how much money do you need and why? And how much money are you going to raise to cover that need for how long? Traditionally speaking, you want to make sure that you have predictability on somewhere between 18 months and 2 years worth of your runway. So if you're losing money or if you're a nonprofit, you want to make sure you can survive 1.5 to 2 years. If you are building a business and you're going to be profitable after that, that's great. But number one, quantum of capital, as we call it, how much money do you want to raise? You want to be thoughtful about that. The second thing then that you want to get to is what kind of funding are you looking for? And a lot of that derives from the kind of enterprise that you're building, for profit, not for profit. And even within for profit ventures, for example, there are different kinds of capital you might raise. I run a venture capital firm, and I like to say that what we provide is kind of like a steroid treatment. So, as if you were in the hospital with a respiratory illness, sometimes you have to take steroids, but it's not really recommended unless you need it because venture capital can be very poisonous to a business. I'm happy to explain that further if people want to talk about it. But venture capital is only one kind of capital that is available to private businesses. There are also more friends and family oriented funding, more non-dilutive funding like grants and government money or UN money. And so again, it's very, very important. The more time you spend upfront thinking, how much money am I going to raise and what structure, what type of funding am I going to bring this in on? It can save you a lot of time because if you're knocking on the wrong doors, then you're going to get a lot of no's, and it's not going to be because your idea is bad. It's going to be because the structure is off and the capital is not the right match. And that's a big, big problem. I see a lot of people waste a lot of time raising the wrong amount of money from the wrong folks. And look, you should surround yourself in some advisors. Certainly, Resolution can help with this and stress testing those assumptions, right? So if you come back and you say, hey, I have a brand new, thing, we've got some traction, and I want to raise $10 million from venture capital. Well, maybe one of us can say, yeah, maybe not, right? Maybe you should rethink that. Or on the other hand, maybe that's a great idea. But again, it's very, very important to think about that. And then the question is, what are you prepared to give up for that money? And there is always a trade, right? Even if you're just a pure nonprofit and you're asking for a grant, it's never just, hey, we got a grant and we're never going to talk to that person again, right? There is stewardship. There is real time that you put into making sure that you give people value for what they invested in you. I think of every fundraising exercise as an investment. Sometimes people are investing $1 and they never expect to see it back. So I would call that 100% cash loss investment. But the investment is still looking for an outcome. So maybe that outcome is social impact, or it might be a seat on your board, or whatever it is. But it's always an investment. So we at Resolution, even though we're a 501(c)(3) US nonprofit, we still think about raising essentially an investment from our donors. And so if you can think about it in that way, then you need to think about what are you prepared to give up for the structure of investment that you're taking in. And you should think about that as a variety of things. You can certainly give up equity in a for-profit company, so people are buying shares of the company. You could give up debt, right? So you could raise it as debt, and then you owe people a debt payment, an interest payment, a coupon payment, as we call it. It could be a grant, in which case you owe people information, perhaps, or even recognition, right? And so it's all these. What are all the currencies that you have to compensate people for supporting you and making an investment in whatever form that investment may be? And so you want to go into battle prepared to know what you're willing to give up. Could you give up a board seat of your organization? Are you prepared to do quarterly reports to your investors or donors? Are you prepared to give up equity? Is it a private business where are allowed to do that? Because of course, in nonprofits, there is no such thing as equity, right? You can't sell a piece of a nonprofit. And again, also, I want to be clear, like the law here is highly variable. So whether you're in Zimbabwe or in Nepal or in Kentucky, there are different rules that apply to these things. You should also be aware of that. So this is the first big point is, know your need. We call this in fundraising the use of proceeds, right? What the proceeds of the grant, what are you going to use it for, whether it be grant investment, et cetera. What type of funding you're looking for and who are your likely investors? What structure can you accept that capital, that investment in, grant, investment, whatever it is? And then what are you prepared to give up in order to do that? What is the consideration that you are giving for those proceeds? Okay, so that's bucket number one. Number two, the audience. So once you've decided those things, you're going to go out and start fundraising. And you're going to even do before that, you're going to do an identification of the likely investors. And again, I'm using the term investor broadly, donor, investor, whatever it's, but just so that we don't always have to say 15 things. So you want to start building your lists. And I will tell you, I am a big fan when fundraising of the shotgun or machine gun approach, not the sniper approach. So you are very unlikely to succeed if you're like, oh, these two donors are really good. Now, there are some situations, for example, we've done a lot of work in Nigeria, and there is, Tony Elumelu, who some of you may have heard of, who is frequently like people are like, oh, well, Tony will do this, right? Because he's got a big entrepreneurship fund, but Tony might do this or he might not. Maybe he doesn't like the color of the front page of your presentation and just doesn't want to do the deal. You can't always be reliant on one thing. And by the way, every jurisdiction, every geography has its version of Tony, right? And so the question then becomes knowing your audience. So you're building a list of likely investors. And then by the way, there's always two kinds of investors from the perspective of kind of their interest in moving first. So I like to say everyone likes to be first to be second. And that is very true, perhaps no more true than in fundraising, right? So when you're saying, hey, I want $300,000, that first 50 grand, that's really, really tough. And you need to go talk to investors who are willing to be the first. And that is a subset. We call in venture capital, we call that lead investors. Some people call them anchor investors. Whatever you want to call it, there is a subset, and it's usually about 10%, in my lived experience, about 10% of all the university people who are able to invest are willing to be the first one to do it in a particular structure. So the first list you want to create is everyone who might be a potential investor, donor, et cetera. The second list you want to create is the subset of those who you know or you suspect might be willing to be first, because you can't go talk to 100 people about being first. And so you want to think about who are those 10 brave people or institutions where they're willing to take the first leap, because then it's easy. Then you have your follower investors like, hey, I'm raising 300,000. I've raised the first 100. Could you be the second and third and fourth of it? And people are like, oh, other people are in, cool. And they set the structure and they did the work on ascertaining if this is a good deal. Fine, great, I'm in, right? So there's a lot more people who are willing to follow than to lead. Then there is the preparation for understanding who you're sitting across from. And this is, I call this the three reasons that people give. Now, in my life, this is true of any kind of fundraising at all, whether it be fundraising around a nonprofit, your university, a startup, the biggest company that's going to go public, whatever it is, there are three overall reasons why people give you money. The first one we can dispense with quickly. It's people who know you and would give you money for pretty much anything. It's your cousin Jessica who just is like, hey, if you want $100, Ocean, here's $100. I really don't care what it's about, right? Like just here it is. We call it friends and family or angel investing. And those people are going to help you no matter what. Now, a lot of folks have access to people like that, and a lot of folks don't have access to people like that. So you can't count on it. But that number one, we call that the personal, the personal giver, right? And they're just going to help you no matter what. And they can also help you stress test your pitch and all that. But fine, let's set that aside. The two kinds of givers you're going to run across when you're running a fundraising process are the two most important types of folks you're going to need to know how to talk to. And here's the problem. If you talk to so I call them, by the way, story givers and model givers. If you tell a model giver a story, you'll fail. And if you tell a story giver a model, you will fail. Now, I already see nodding, so I think you already understand where I'm going with this. But let me give you an example. For the Resolution Project, if I'm sitting in front of a donor who might give us $100,000, and I say, Susie Matoni's deal is just the most incredible story. I got to tell you about her. She is an exemplar of the kind of resolution fellows that we've backed. This is her incredible, inspiring personal story. This is the impact of her venture. We have more folks like her, but it's her face on the front page of the section on why you're giving to us. And I want you to be moved. I want to see tears, right? I want to see I want to pull on your heartstrings. There are a lot of investors and donors who are moved by that, and they want to know, they want to make it personal. They want all right, tell me the stories of a few of the people you're helping, right? And that can be very, very, very effective. Then there are people, and I tend to be more like this, who are like, that's a cool story, but explain to me how this works at scale. Anyone can tell me a story. I want to understand the system. What are your economics? Can you do this sustainably or profitably? Am I going to make money on this, or at least make a significant social return on my investment? Walk me through the numbers. I really don't care about a story, and frankly, I kind of think you're just trying to sell me. Walk me through the model. And here's the issue. If you try and sell a model giver on Susie's story, they're going to be like, nah, it doesn't really move me. And if you go to the story giver and you say here are my statistics and this is how it works systematically and this is a great system, they're going to be like, I'm unmoved by this. It didn't touch me. And so understanding that is really important. Now, how do you get to the bottom of who you're sitting across from? This is a very interesting question. There's two ways to do that. The first is research. So you can go and talk, if you've identified who kind of very significant investors or donors are in your area or geography or sector, you can often glean from reading what they've written about or their podcast appearances or whatever, what they are. If they're talking about I made this investment in this really amazing kid and was orphaned when she was 5 and da 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 da, and this is what it moved. And then we made this, we traveled the world together. Okay, that might be a story giver. On the other hand, if you've got someone on a podcast being like, oh my God, this thing, it's in 32 countries and it generated, $16.7 million in free cash flow and we impacted 16.2 million lives, right? Now that might be a model giver. And if you don't have a corpus of evidence outside, then when you're sitting across from someone, try and do both in the first minute or two of your pitch. So I like to do this, right? So if I'm pitching Resolution Project, I'll say something like, thanks so much for taking the meeting. And within the first minute also, I was like, look, I'm really excited because I get to tell you a little bit about an organization. I've had an enormous amount of personal satisfaction by how scaled we have become. We're in almost 100 countries where, our Resolution Fellows have created, over $6 billion of market cap and are helping millions and millions of people. And you're looking across the table or through the Zoom call and someone's like, oh yeah, all right, that's yeah. And they're like, oh, well, how many countries and where? And then you say, and look, it's been really rewarding for me to be involved in that, and equally rewarding for me to be the guide to Darius Parles, who's an incredible resolution fellow, and tell his story. And if the next question is, oh, do you have offices in all those countries? Or oh, how do you fund such a scale? But you're talking to a model giver. And if on the other hand, they say, Darius was orphaned when he was 8 and his father was stabbed in a parking lot in front of him. How did he make it through that? Now you're probably talking to a story giver. And the difference, I almost have two completely separate pitches for those people. And this is not something people talk a lot about in fundraising, but you don't always need to tell the same story. You need to tell a consistent story. But if you can have an entire pitch that's based on statistics and scalability and your quantitative assessments, and you can have an entire story that's a little bit more on the heartstrings, and you can just slip into the groove of telling one or another story. Now, you're going to get all the information across either way, right? Like even a story giver does eventually want to get to the nuts and bolts of the matter, right? But what's going to move them to actually support you is going to be the story, and vice versa for the model givers. This is really important. So again, know your lead investors and your followers, and know your personal givers, your story givers, and your model givers, and try and get to the bottom of that as quickly as possible because it will change the way you win. Third area, narrative and materials. So, fundraising is actually an operation, right? It is something that you can prepare for, and it is something that if you are unprepared for, it will dramatically lessen your capability to be successful. People go raise money off the cuff all the time and they fail. You need to have all the stuff lined up and ready. And even if it takes you a few more weeks to do it and a few more conversations and dry runs, do the work because you want to go into battle fully prepared. And that includes an overall deck, which I know you guys have all worked on, which includes equal parts of inspiration and information, I like to say, right? Because story and model, right? So always have, be able to capture both people in your materials. Have your toolkit, and the toolkit for fundraising is different things in different sectors. So in the nonprofit sector, we often call it a case for support. It's more like a PDF document that has your full case for why you want to do it. It has your statistics, your model, how it works, all different, numbers and everything. And in a startup, it might be a data room. The data room might have things like your financial model and your projections and all that. But whatever the toolkit is for fundraising, and those are very knowable things, we can talk about them if you wish. Have that toolkit ready. So have your deck, which is your central, font of inspiration and information. Have your toolkit, your data room, case for support, etc., and then have your pitch and have your pitch down. But here's a truth that may be disappointing to some of you. You have to know your pitch so well that you don't have it memorized. Let me let that sit with you for a second. When I sit there and I see someone reciting to me, I know that you don't know in your bones what it is that you're doing. Now, I understand that some people have concerns with public speaking and pitching, and I understand that memorization can help you. So if it's the only way you can do it, absolutely do that, right? Because you're still going to get the information across. But people, when you go into the place in your mind where you're reciting, it breaks the personal contact you have with the person you're speaking with. And it also demonstrates that you are unsure of yourself, right? When you memorize, it means that you don't really know what it is you're going to say. So you had to memorize a sheet of paper. And as an investor and a donor, that's concerning to me. So again, let me emphasize, if you need to do that, because otherwise you're just going to freeze up, that's okay, especially as you're getting more used to being in front of people. Just do your thing, right? Memorize and be fine with it. But if you can avoid it at all, know your pitch so well that it comes out slightly differently every time based on who you're talking to, but all the key things are in it. I know this is a weird concept. Does this make sense? Give me a nod if it makes sense. Okay. So like if you heard me pitch Resolution Project, and you asked an AI to parse it, it would be about 20 to 30% different every time, but every key piece of information comes across every single time. I'm like a machine for getting across the information, but it's slightly inflected based on the situation that we're in. And so, for example, just a live example right now, like I haven't memorized anything I'm telling you today. I know fundraising so well that I can do this substantially the same way year after year with no memorization. Okay. And I'm not asking for applause for that. I'm saying like people have your thing, you should know this well, right? This is my thing. I know it this well, so I don't have to memorize this talk because it's there, it's in there. And if you're asking for people to support you with money, or whatever else, by the way, whatever other kind of investment, volunteerism, etc., you should know your thing so well that you can speak to it fluently like this. That's a really important thing because the pitch, oftentimes, it's just a few minutes. I mean, the average venture capitalist spends about 18 seconds on a deck before they decide whether they want to read the rest of it. Now, you might think that that's ridiculous, but let me just give you some statistics here. I see between 3,000 and 5,000 pitches a year. And I'm not even a very famous venture capitalist. I'm like a middle venture capitalist. And a lot of big donors, big families, wealthy people, they see similar volume. So if you can't capture attention within under a minute for your written materials and probably about the same for spoken, It's not going anywhere, right? Okay, so that's narrative and materials. Last but not least, this is something that goes across everything we've talked about so far, and it's networking and building relationships. So, a few things. The best time to build relationships with funders is not when you are actively fundraising. There's an axiom out there, which is the best time to meet with a donor is when you don't need money. Now, when we're building organizations, we always need money, right? But there are times at which you're kind of going out there to do a raise, whether it be a startup or a nonprofit. And there's times out there where you're just meeting people. And the best time to talk to a donor and build a relationship is when you're not sitting there being like, and so at the end of this coffee, I must ask you for money. The best time is when you leave and you say, listen, it was so great to meet you. Somali, you're awesome. Listen, if it's okay with you, when, we're going to be doing something later this year, I'd love to be back in touch with you and send you some information. And Somali as a human is going to say something like, of course, please feel free to send me anything, because almost no one's like, no, I hated this coffee with you and I don't ever want to hear from you again, right? It's just very, very not human to hear that. And what you're doing is you're kicking the door open. And look, fundraising is psychology, right? Like it's all psychology, it's all relationships. You want to believe that it's how good your idea is. You want to believe it's about how good your statistics are or your impact and all that. And that all plays a role, right? If you're selling a dud, eventually you're not going to be able to raise against it. But actually, like 80% of this thing is psychology and human relationships. And so that's why I leave this networking and relationship building thing to last, because it's actually the most important part of this whole thing. And so a few things I can give you that are concrete pieces of information. I created a tracker for myself on how I track all my relationships. It's now about 4,000 relationships. I'm 44, so I'm a lot older than you guys are. But start building that database. Whether you use a CRM or just an Excel spreadsheet, track everything. And by the way, you never know when someone you meet is going to end up being someone who can help you. And it might not be cash, it could be volunteerism, it could be another connection. But relentlessly catalog the people that you meet, LinkedIn and all that. And I realize this makes me sound like a little bit of a psychopath, but like, look, it's the way that I've been as successful as I have been able to be so far. Is like, it's all been about the people that I know. Like all of my success in whatever success I've had has been related to being surrounded by awesome people and having carefully like thought through those things. It's not being a mercenary, right? Like most of the conversations I have with people that I know are not about fundraising. But then when you do have that conversation, you know what's out there and you've built that relationships. There is a really interesting problem in the cadence of follow up and the priority you were in. A lot of people who go out and fundraise will send an email out to 100 people and then just wait. You have to understand something about your fundraising. You are their 100th priority. No matter how awesome you are and no matter how nice they are, when you're talking to a wealthy person or a venture capital firm or a foundation or whatever, they have 100 people asking the exact same thing you did. And so you have to do what I call relentless but respectful follow up. For me, it's every 2 weeks. Some people do it more frequently, some people do it every month, but whatever it is, have a rotisserie roll of follow up and don't take it personally. I cannot tell you the number of times it was on the sixth or seventh follow up. So 3 to 3.5 months after the initial follow up, where I sent another email being like, hey, Liz, just checking in on this again. I really love to put this in front of you. And until someone says to me, no, I do not want to invest in this, I do not want to give you money, every 2 weeks they hear from me. Who can be mad at that, right? If someone's mad at me, they're going to say like, Oliver, please stop bothering me about this. Okay, thank you for the feedback. Much appreciated. So sorry to bug you, right? Don't have any ego in this, but relentless, respectful follow-up is amazing, because that first email, it got buried, it's in their spam box, they were really busy, you're their 100th priority, and you're just not their first priority, and like nothing that you think about yourself or your idea is going to change that. So relentless, respectful follow-up, that cadence for me every 2 weeks, and then you just roll through it, right? And it's never over until someone said yes or no. No answer is no answer. So just keep trying, right? Um, Forgive me for 1 second, folks. I need 10 seconds to shut off a house alarm. My apologies. Thank you for that forbearance. Okay. Um, Next thing. Part of that respectful, relentless follow up is always holding the high ground. So you will hear very insulting things when you're raising money. People just write back, no, or they just ignore you for months, or they take a lot of your time and then they pass. Um, It's very hard and it's very frustrating. And believe me, I'm a pretty successful fundraiser and I hear no about 90% of the time. So you just need to recognize that's how it is. And reputations are built during fundraising because all the foundations and the venture capitalists and the wealthy people, they all know each other. These are very small networks. It's a very small world. And so if the word gets out that Mary like got really mad because someone passed on them, like other people just won't take a meeting, right? And so that you just always hold the high ground, even if you feel a little bit downtrodden with the process. Like whenever people pass on me, even if they wrote me a beautiful email being like, I'm really so sorry, I thought your thing was amazing, but I'm just not gonna be able to do this right now, or if they just wrote back, no, I just write back, hey, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And then it goes into my tracker as they passed on this. But by the way, maybe not the next thing. I've had people who've passed on me, including in very like perfunctory ways, who ended up putting $1 million behind something else later. You just never know. Sometimes you're hitting people at a bad time in their life. Sometimes it's just not the right kind of idea, the right kind of structure, whatever it is. So just, hold the high ground and always keep your cool. Um, Again, building on a theme here, there is no such thing as no. There's only not now. Okay. So don't just be like, you're dead to me forever because you passed on something I showed you. Maybe they don't like early stage risk, but they really like growth stage risk. And so once you're really working, but then you need a lot more money, maybe they're your right person. So remember, it's not no, it's not now. And the other thing is when people, this is again psychology for you, when people say no, they feel bad except for a very small group of people who are really mean. Like most people, when they pass, they feel bad about passing. So they want to make you feel better. So they'll often say something nice, like, "Hey, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. This really wasn't for us right now, but look, so thankful for you showing me the opportunity, and like, keep in touch. What do you ask for? Two introductions, not five, not one, not zero, two introductions. Hey, thank you so much for your time. I totally understand this wasn't for you right now. Is there any chance that you might have a couple of ideas for me on folks that you would?" And because people feel bad about having said no, a lot of people will be like, "No, I'm sorry, I just don't do that." But hey, if you can get, out of 100 folks who you went to, 90 folks are going to say no. If 10% of those folks, so nine people, gave you 18 more leads, that's 20% more people you're fundraising from all of a sudden. And by the way, those leads are usually not complete BS, right? Like usually people were thoughtful about that because they're not just going to introduce you to their friend for nothing. So they're now qualified leads. So you turn a rejection into opportunity, right? So remember, people do feel bad for passing, and the best thing to ask for is two more introductions. Okay. Um, all right. Last couple of things. Resilience. I alluded to this several times in this past few minutes, but you're going to hear no a lot. And by the way, even if you are a champion fundraiser, you're going to hear no 90% of the time. If your thing is the coolest thing since sliced bread, Mark Zuckerberg heard no 90% of the time when he was raising seed money for Facebook, right? Like you just need to build the framework of understanding that no doesn't mean you're bad or that your thing is bad or that you did a bad job. It is the natural position of funders because again, remember those ratios. I'm seeing 3 to 5,000 deals, and in my venture firm, I'm going to do 10 this year. I mean, it is considerably easier to get into Harvard than it is to get into my portfolio, right? And so if you play that out across all funders, like you're going to hear no a lot. So just remember, like that's a part of this process, and don't let it get you down. It's very frustrating, and but you do, like, I get it. I hear a no and I'm like, oh man, womp, womp. But like don't let it get past that. Just relentlessly move on to the next thing. um and that's it. I think that's the key. So networking and building relationships, these are lifelong relationships. No means not now, et cetera. Just think about these things as a holistic thing. Last but not least, I want to leave you with the most important insight in fundraising that I ever got in my whole life. And it came from my grandfather. My grandfather was a Nobel Prize winning scientist who also ran a $4 billion hospital, but he took over the hospital when it was a $2 million institute. And he, while doing Nobel Prize research, turned it into a $4 billion hospital. By the way, he was a refugee from Latin America. He fought in a war. Like, this is a crazy story, right? And he always told me this: there is a spectrum between gratitude and confidence. And the greatest leaders and fundraisers, because you kind of need money for almost any kind of leadership, are right in the center of that. You need confidence to raise money. You need to believe in what you're doing. You need to evince confidence in other people that you have what it takes. But you also have to recognize, and this is something, for example, that certain leaders recently have shown too little of, which is gratitude, right? Like you didn't get where you're going alone. You have your team, you have your funders. And so if you can always remember that you should display enough confidence in what you're doing to inspire confidence in your donor, but gratitude to understand that you are going to recognize what they're doing for you, that midpoint is really the key. And it requires a very special thing, which is belief in what you are selling. Now, you're like, duh, of course I have to believe in what I'm selling. But there is an interesting correlation, an interesting outcome of belief in what you're selling, which is a mental flip, which is the most important thing that I ever learned in fundraising. So this all is building to this one thing. A lot of people don't like fundraising because it feels like you're asking for something. It feels like your hand is out and you're like, please help me. Right? Is it uncomfortable? How many people you have felt like that? Oh, I can't believe I have to go ask for money. Show of hands. Everybody, right? It should be almost everybody. I felt that too. That is the wrong way to think about fundraising. Yes, you require gratitude when people say yes, but you are offering someone the chance to be a part of something that you believe in, a chance to help it continue. And so the opportunity is an opportunity. It's not just rhetoric. And you are not just with your hand out asking for something, you are providing an opportunity to be a part of something. And so when I internalized that, it turned the conversation from this really bad power dynamic of like, please, sir, may I have some more? My name is Oliver after all, right? To hey, like I'm gonna have a reasonable conversation with you. I'm gonna be so grateful if you say yes, because a lot of people say no, but I'm selling something to you that I believe in, whether it's a donation opportunity, investment, whatever it is, and you should want to help me because it's worthy, right? Not, and I don't expect you to do it, and I'm going to be very grateful when you do it, all those things, but it's not just a handout. It's an investment, even if it's a donation, right? And so that sense of the midpoint between gratitude and confidence and then belief in what you're selling, meaning that you are offering an opportunity, a genuine chance to be part of what you're doing, that is the way to get out of the mind frame of you're begging because you're not. You're offering an opportunity. That is all I have in terms of prepared remarks. Questions you may have for me. Not all at once. Just shout them out if you have them,
I have a question. Sorry.
please.
I don't know how it's going to be related to this, and I hope I don't stray too much. But what I find the hardest part of fundraising for a nonprofit is paying a staff and how you pitch that to investors and donors. Ocean and I have had to literally mask staffing into program delivery, instead of calling it staffing or something like that, to kind of like slide it, or even breaking that down to like the costs of attending our program or something like that, so that people can see the importance of being able to fool the people that get to do the work that we are succeeding in. So I don't know, from a fundraising perspective, how do you navigate um, asking money for staffing so that your organization can actually be stable? Because no one is going to
Yeah.
volunteer for 5 years. Uh, Sorry, I don't know how you navigate that and how you pitch it.
Look, it's maybe one of the most critical questions in all of nonprofit fundraising. So you put your finger on something very, very important here. I have three things that I can share with you, and I'm quickly writing them down so I don't forget them. Um, Okay. Um, the the first thing is you're not like in nonprofits, you do assign your staff costing the as between kind of like overhead and program delivery. That's not hiding it. That's just something we all do. I mean, resolution does that too. There's a certain percentage of resolutions. If you were to say like, hey, I want all my giving to go to programs, we fold a bunch of our staff stuff into programs. Most of the staff members who are here are in that program, category. That's not hiding it. That's just the program staff goes as amortized against your program spend, and that's something that is not that you shouldn't feel like that's subterfuge. I mean, that's just the cost of doing a program, right? So number one, don't feel bad about that. That's the right thing to do. And look, the more stuff you can stuff into that reasonably, the better. You always want to be ethical. I always believe like, you clearly want to be ethical. That's really important. Low integrity people can raise money for some period of time, but not forever. And it usually leads to trouble. But even with high integrity, if you just properly assign the costs of what you're doing to programs, that's perfectly fine. And you usually want to give people the chance to dive into your numbers as well, in your data room or whatever you have compiled in your case for support. Um, the next thing that I want to share, though, is you do want to raise money from reasonable people. And most reasonable people who want to support your organization will understand that you need some people around to do that. So if someone is sitting there being like, hey, I don't want a single dollar that I'm giving you to go to people at all, no matter what, even if they're fully programmed people, you're dealing with a crazy person, right? And like, okay, maybe you can take their money, but you don't, in the main, you want to raise money from folks who are reasonable, who understand what you're doing. And actually, in my experience, most people, as long as you can tie to, like, what people don't want is they don't want like a massive headquarters with like, you have two chiefs of staff and a driver, right? Like that's concerning, right? But you don't have that. And so as long as you can say, like, hey, program delivery, this is like a big part of our cost is people. Like, by the way, for most small nonprofits, most of the cost is people, and people understand that. So you just want to make a reasonable case for why that is and why it's the right number. That's kind of why it was number one for me is like, what are you raising money against? And it doesn't, people are okay. Just make the case. Last but not least, though, remember, not all dollars are the same dollars. So the holy grail of nonprofit fundraising is general operating dollars, right? The general operating dollars is like, here's $1,000. Use it for whatever you see fit in your budget. Yay. That is hard. And that only tends to come later in your life as a nonprofit when people really understand and have faith in you. And so you get those big general ops grants. Most of the time, it's still restricted. And so within restricted gifts, hey, I really care about your work in this particular geography. Okay, you have to load that with the staff cost. That's really what happens.
Thank you. Just like a follow-up for that, you talked about restricted funds and non-restricted. So for instance, even just pitching for resolution right now, let's say our budget is like 200 and something, but you're only pitching for like, let's say $20,000 grant or like $50,000 grant. How do you pick and choose a specific part of your budget, or do you just go on a general sense? I don't know if you, let's say I'm going to just narrow on program delivery or like on student flights for my case or something like that. Is that putting myself at a disadvantage? Should I just like always pitch generally and then get
No.
to let the donor choose what to?
So that second section that we talked about today about knowing your audience, that's where this kicks in. So for example, there are certain organizations like Resolution where actually we understand the power of general ops and we're okay being general ops funders. But for example, you might get an introduction to someone who owns a regional airline and like you want to pitch them the air travel, right? And by the way, you might get some stuff for free that's a total know your audience situation, Mary. And like so there are times where you're going to be like, hey, with this person, like this, like they really, really care about, nutritious food for kids. And so I want all the food for the, whatever it is, right? So, but if you're in front of a sophisticated, and I don't mean sophisticated in a pejorative way, but like a general and sophisticated investor or donor, try general ops first because they'll understand your overhead, right? And so we at Resolution, like that's one of the reasons why our grants are carefully denominated, but we don't like say, oh, you can only use them for one thing or another. Like you can use them for the things you said you were going to use them for, but generally speaking, we're very broad with the application of that. Other questions? Yes, Mia.
Thanks so much for your time today, Oliver. You mentioned that the first 18 seconds are particularly important when pitching an investor. And I was wondering, in your experience, what are kind of things that you're looking for in that initial minute, perhaps? And B, what are kind of red flags that tend to go off in your head when you're listening to pitches as well?
Red flags are when people make like massive claims or they're clearly being disingenuous, and it happens a lot, right? People will be like, this is going to be the next Uber. Oh, really? Okay. I'm so glad you're raising what, 20 grand, so like just, you just have to keep grounded and present a good, the 18 seconds is decks in particular, right? So like we use DocSend a lot for decks now in the venture capital industry, so we can actually see, and most VCs will spend under 20 seconds on a deck. The average is 18. And so there you want that. And by the way, it's funny because it's not always on the first slide. So like a lot of VCs will go straight to the back and see what you're raising, and they'll also go straight to your 5-year projections to see if it fits with their investment thesis. And so there's a few slides that become very popular. to look at, and people look at them very quickly. And look, it's not insulting. Like I can tell what's going on in a company with under 20 seconds if you show me the proper deck with the proper. And so some of it is just like if your deck is really good and the information is where I hope that it will be, I can tell very quickly. It's a little bit like an experienced doctor who like walks into the room, looks at someone's feverish looking forehead, and they're like, I'm 90% sure that person has the flu, right? Like, and 90% of the time they're right about that. I have the same sixth sense for a deck. When you're talking to someone live is when you have a couple, 3 minutes, and that's the place where you want to weave in the model and the story giver narrative. So again, I can demo it for you if you want, but like you want to have like a pretty canned first 2 minutes that you're really confident in. Again, try not to memorize it, but you want to hit the high points and you want to give people handholds, and the handholds will tell you more about the person, right? So that first 2 minutes is an overview. It involves some kind of statistical modular kind of stuff, and then some stuff around a story that should move them, and see what they react to. And you have to be a student of people, right? Again, psychology. If you're looking across the table and they're blank stare when you're telling them the story, they're telling you something about how they think about this, right? So just like always be an observer of what's going on across the table. Other questions?
Hello, thank you very much, Oliver. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay. I had a similar question to Mia. You mentioned something about massive claims. I wanted to understand if that also includes some massive states we usually put, like if I'm talking to you about a problem, I give you like the global states, sometimes which are accurate and sometimes which are like estimates. Does that also include that? Then my other question was, I found something interesting. You talked about having like a sheet to track your relationships with like people. We have like a sheet where we track our applications, but not specifically relationships. So I wanted to understand when reaching out to people, is you like using LinkedIn for reaching out to someone I haven't met a good idea, or I need to focus on people that I've met in person for that kind of impression? Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Let me quickly handle the second part of that first. It is always better to get a warm intro. Now, sometimes you can't. And then a really, really well-crafted cold outreach can sometimes be successful, but you are going to be 10 to 20 times more successful with a warm intro. Now that can be a pretty loose warm intro. So like I might see on LinkedIn that someone I really want to talk to at the Rockefeller Foundation, Liz knows, and then I send Liz a quick email and I'm like, hey Liz, like I really want to talk to Joe Schmo at the Rockefeller Foundation. Any chance you might just like put in a good word and see if they'll chat with me? And even that ratchets up your success rate very highly. So you can use cold outreach, and I've done it many times, and sometimes it works, but your hit rate goes up. Your yield and hit rate goes up the warmer the introduction is. And of course, the warmest possible thing is someone who you've met in person, which is always the tightest of possible connections. With respect to the other thing, so I do want to distinguish between claims about what your thing is going to do and claims about market size. Now, you can still turn someone off by saying the market for what I'm doing is, a thousand trillion billion million dollar, right? Like, you want to have a thoughtful thing, but we in the venture industry look at what's called TAM, SAM, SOM. This is of limited utility to everybody, but if you haven't run across it, it's total addressable market, serviceable addressable market, serviceable obtainable market. And you can look this up on, ChatGPT or Google, whatever you want. But essentially, it basically means the entire universe of every dollar being spent on this problem, the amount that you might eventually be able to attack, and then the amount that you think your specific entity is going to be able to bring in. So if to use Uber as a very wonky example, like the amount of dollars spent on all automobile related transportation in the world is your total addressable market. The amount spent on all rideshare is your serviceable addressable market of a rideshare business. And then your serviceable obtainable market is what percentage of that rideshare market you think your company can eventually go and grab. And generally speaking, if we see a stupid looking TAM SAM SOM analysis, that's a big turnoff. So you want to be as proper as possible. Here's another thing though. You may remember this from the finals of your resolution competition. Most pitches spend way too much time on problem and much too little time on solution. Uh, what is the problem that your venture is looking to solve? Very briefly. Like what is the area? Is it in hunger, education?
It's an agriculture for using the problem of, sorry, it's in agriculture, and we are solving the problem of lack of fodder in cities like Kigali, like fodder for animals.
Okay. So what happens in a pitch like that is like usually that problem can be delivered in like 30 seconds or less. Kigali's a big city. There are X number of animals. X number of people depend on those animals. And you know what? There's 40% too little fodder, which means dead animals, lost revenue, unhappy, poverty-stricken families. Period. Right? Like people go through like they're like, and then here's another picture of a goat with no fodder, and then here's a picture of like, and then here's another statistic, and here's another news article, and it's like, no, 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 we got it, we got it. Like it's a problem. You've convinced me. Fodder is a problem. What the heck are you going to do about it? And people spend half their pitching time, sometimes 2/3 of their pitching time on problem because problem is easy. Problem is the most convincing thing because it probably is a problem. And I mean, I was an early investor in Uber, and if TK had spent all of his time on people needing to go places in cities, it would have been like, yeah, we know, right? We need to get places, and it's expensive, and like, what are you going to do about it, right? Like, this is really, really important stuff. Deliver your problem statement quickly, convincingly, and with real numbers, but get out of that as soon as possible into what you're going to do about it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
So I just want to go into the question that Mary asked earlier about how to take care of the payment of staff problem. So if you are a nonprofit, not necessarily a social enterprise, that has a couple of projects that you're running, and then because the way fundraising works, or in my experience, most of the time, if you're getting money, is very project specific and it's for periods of time. Sometimes not a year, sometimes it can be 6 months, sometimes a year, right? So even in fixing the payments of staff into like programming, can be a bit limiting, because if the project is done, then how do you continue to pay your staff? Right. So my question goes back to fundraising specifically for operations and like the growth of a nonprofit.
First of all, it's more similar than you might think to private fundraising, because that's often the case too. Like, hey, I want to fund a pilot, or I want to fund this one deployment or whatever. But anyway, point is, initially you do have to kind of be hand to mouth like that. I mean, in the early days of Resolution, we funded each social venture challenge intrinsically, and we didn't have anyone working for us full time. We actually waited 4 years before having a full-time staff, which to my mind now is kind of mind-boggling. But and then you build, but look, as you build credibility, as those programs start to work, you then create a fundraising opportunity for more general support, and you go identify people who will do that. You have to be intentional about it. You have to go say, hey, I've been doing these one-off projects. I've been successful. We've delivered. I have these people. Someone, for goodness sakes, is going to give me the 100 grand I need to make this sustainable year over year. And you go pitch those people, and those are oftentimes different donors, right? That goes a little bit back to that know your audience kind of thing. Maybe the person who is super happy to keep, and look, a lot of people tend to try and cannibalize their existing funders. Don't do that, right? If you have a funder who reliably will always sponsor your annual program in a local community, don't try and turn that person into a general ops, run rate funder. Like, go find someone who's going to do that for you, because you know that you're good on that program. And so a lot of people make that mistake. They're like, oh, well, this is my donor, and so now I have to have that donor step up to a bigger number and change the whole way they think about my organization. No, like, think about it more like, hey, we're good here on this program. They keep them happy, maybe grow that program over the years, but like, no, go find a net new funder who really cares about the sustainability of your organization, and you build a case for that by being successful with your programs for years. So in the early years, it can be a little uncomfortable, but you will be creating a case for more sustainable support, and then you got to go find the people who will do that for you. But it becomes a giving opportunity, right? I do have to hop, folks, but of course, any other questions you have, please reach out to the staff. They will connect us. I wish you all the best of luck. You're all doing really awesome things. This is a great pleasure for me to see you all, and also to spend time with you today. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you,
so
Oliver.
much, Oliver, for your time. And very quickly, before we all log off, I'd love to get a screenshot. I will count down to 3. So if you're comfortable being on camera, please come off. All right. 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Got it. Thanks again, everyone. Like Oliver said, if you have any questions we didn't get to today, email us or send it on WhatsApp and we'll send it over to Oliver. And please make sure to register for the Enactus World Cup. If you have any problems with that, let us know and we'll reach out when we have the next webinar next month. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.